Deviating magicians control mana in a different way. They don't use the environment mana, they use their own mana reserves. One example is his mother. Her healing spell is very different from the rest, but for diviners, it's even stronger. They don't use mana to see the future. Each time they see the future, their lifespan is reduced. Her sister Rania, Virian's wife, was an even more powerful diviner than her. She came to be the pride of all Elenwar. After marrying Virian, a beautiful future awaited them, or that's what they thought. The war between elves and humans was approaching its end, but the tension was still evident. And there was something else. Rania later saw that the human king's plan was to kill the elf that was the heir to the throne. So she tried to change the path of the future again and again. But nothing changed. Virian would end up dying in different ways each time that she used her power. Years of her life were lost, until the future changed and the current human king killed his father and the war ended. Shortly afterwards Rania died. Now Rania used the same power to see Arthur's future. The world is changing, and wherever she looks, Arthur is at the center of everyone. He will suffer a lot in the future. No matter what he does, it will be like that. So she says only two things: people do bad things for good reasons, and sometimes the most powerful enemy is not the one who wields power over a throne, but an abandoned soldier who has nothing left to lose. Without revealing anything else, she tells him to rest. Everyone, upon waking up, says goodbye to Rania, who says that she spoke with Arthur while they all had a small rest. And thanks to a personal portal, Arthur and Tesha go back to Xyrus. When he gets home, they welcome him. Jasmine is there, together with the rest of the twin horns. Tesha tells him that she has matters to deal with in the academy, and they say goodbye. Together, they all remember the old stories, and they drink too much. But as is usual in this story, good times don't last long. The committee gets ready for a team training session. Kai is preparing the barrier to avoid causing excessive damage. But something weird happens with the barrier. Its color and shape are abnormal, and they quickly ask Kai to deactivate it. But she doesn't seem to hear them on the other side. So they look for the internal switch to deactivate it, but it is disconnected. Suddenly, they receive an attack from a group of wizards who enter without any trouble. Among them is Lucas. His appearance is sinister, and he says that they're stupid for realizing that this was a trap set by Kai. With a fast move, he places himself in the middle of everyone, and he does an attack and splits them. Claire tries to attack him, but even his fire guardian is abnormal, and nobody can do anything against him. But he stops abruptly when he receives a message. His target is approaching. Claire finds an opening in the barrier, but Kai and Doradria stay to win time. But outside everything is worse. The students are being attacked by rabid mana beasts. Tesha is arriving at the academy and she feels a tremor. Getting off the carriage, she sees how a large barrier covers the entire academy and her carriage is hit by an attack. Lucas has arrived to capture her. Her body is not entirely well. The beast's magic is under control thanks to the bracelet that Rania gave her, but that's also suppressing her mana, so no attacks will affect Lucas. He tells her that she looks better silent and that in time, she may like him more than her boyfriend. Tesha realizes that his plan is to capture her and use her as bait to attract Arthur, so she tries to buy time and she removes the bracelet. The mana goes out of control and it manages to harm him. But that is not enough since Lucas expels fire mana and he manages to knock her down. He then grabs Tesha by the hair and he drags her into the barrier. Inside, Elijah fights several mana beasts, but things become complicated for him since he's attacked from all sides. But he pierces them with his ground spikes. The hooded fiends are only attacking the elves and dwarves, and they force the humans to join them to avoid having their core destroyed as a punishment. Among them there are also some professors. Elijah and Curtis manage to make them flee, but a voice transmission alerts them, and it calls everyone to gather in front of the clock building. When they arrive, there are several wounded and dead people. Desperation took hold of everyone. Inside a barrier, the revolutionaries' leader tells them that he doesn't understand why they want to fight after the deaths they have witnessed, and he throws something at them. It's Doradria's head. Elijah throws up and he can't believe what he's seeing. Theo arrives and he challenges him to fight. He removes the mask and he introduces himself. His name is Draniv and he accepts his challenge. Theo attacks with all his power and he seems to have harmed him, but he's the one who was harmed. After mocking him, he kills Theo with a single attack. Claire grabs Curtis so he can't do anything. He feels impotent about not being able to do anything, and Kathleen tells him that he will only manage to get himself killed. Behind Draniv, chained elves enter, among them Faerith and Tesha. Draniv continues with his speech. He comes from a different continent, a very cruel place for the weak. That's why he went to the academy, where they told him that he would find Dickathon's elite. But, in comparison, they are trash. So he will pick the most talented ones to give them power and prepare this land to be ruled by their lord. One example of them is Lucas, who rejoices in saying that Tesha was too weak. In response, Elijah explodes with rage, and he shouts about how he could do something like that to her, and he exudes a dark and sinister mana, accompanied by black iron spikes. This was the birth of something very dangerous for Dickathan's future, and especially for Arthur Lewin. His eyes turned red. A black fire formed in his hands, capable of consuming even non-existence, anything that it may touch. In that way, he manages to cross the barrier. Corrupt mana beasts approach him, but he kills them as if they were insignificant with these iron spikes. The mana that he exudes is more intense each time, and he thinks in his mind that this is not him. A group of wizards goes behind him, but Draniv stops them. Elijah suffers a collapse, but he shoots a spike towards Lucas, which pierces his shoulder. He is stunned by the surprise, but Elijah vanishes. At that point, Draniv seizes him, and some nostalgia shows in his face. A group of professors takes advantage of the situation to enter, thanks to how Elijah opened a section of the barrier, and they attack. Draniv decides that something unexpected has arisen, and he must retreat to his continent, taking Elijah, but not without first ordering Lucas to eliminate everyone and telling him to follow him across the portal. Glory is able to defeat the beasts, but there are many wizards to fight with. At that moment, a group of students led by Claire helps them. Her goal is to go after Kai. On her way, she dodges some earth spikes, but Kai traps her with her iron threads. But something weird happens. The threads let go, but she's still hanging. Curtis and Kathleen scream while they head towards her. She doesn't understand what's happening until she decides to look down and she sees how an earth spike pierces her chest. But at that same moment, an immense mana overflow puts everyone on alert. There are terrified faces watching what is approaching. But Claire sheds some tears and a smile appears on her face. Arthur Lewin has arrived, and behind him comes a majestic beast. Two sharp horns protrude from its head, its scales are bright, obsidian color. Its eyes glow with ferocity. But there was something more fearsome than the dragon. Each step was full of confidence, and his body exuded a very intense rage, and above everything else, a violent rage. Claire only regretted that she wouldn't be able to see Lucas' expression when he is massacred. Lucas feels a great fear. He wouldn't have imagined the power of what is before him even in his nightmares. He tries to provoke Arthur, but the latter only goes past him, completely ignoring him. The first thing he does is check Tesha's vitals, but Lucas continues provoking him. Sylvie responds with a roar, but Arthur continues ignoring him. He decides to go face him, but he stops abruptly. He started to feel an irrational fear. Arthur finally shifts his attention to him. He tells him that he always thought of him as a worm who wasn't worth killing. But if that worm decides to be a nuisance, even the greatest saint wouldn't hesitate to crush him. Lucas felt how a force was seizing him. He can't believe that after what happened, Arthur is still stronger than him. So he summons two weird fireballs and he throws them. Arthur triggers his Beast Will's second phase and, with his hand, he counters the attack with a bluish fire. Lucas summons a blue fire spear, but Arthur seizes it. In his right hand, he shoots a black beam which hits Lucas directly and makes him lose an arm. With no time to suffer, Arthur, with his left hand, takes his remaining arm and he freezes it until it shatters into 1,000 pieces. Arthur keeps ignoring any word that comes out of Lucas and he goes on. This time, he destroys his left leg. Lucas, despite his situation, continues in his attempt to unsettle him, and he mentions that Elijah was captured by Draniv. But Arthur says that that is a matter for some other time, and he destroys the last limb of his that remained intact. Since his last life, he hadn't experienced being looked at by everyone because of his dominant strength, the fear, surprise, and admiration. He had forgotten how solitary he was. After he deactivated his beast's will, he felt his body collapse. Lucas cried for his brother, and behind him, there was a flash of mana. 3 spears have just arrived. Lucas dies in front of his brother. Baron succumbs to his rage and he attacks. Arthur doesn't have mana to defend himself, so Sylvie charges against the spears, but Arthur orders her not to attack them. At that moment, Barry captures Sylvie and the dwarf spear. Alfred summons a magma golem that helps in the evacuation. But Baron is in front of Arthur and he says that death is not enough for someone like him. However, Alfred stops him and he says that he saved everyone else from his brother's attack. Baron ignores him and he goes after Arthur, but a golem grabs him from behind. Baron frees himself with a fire and lightning attack and he's about to kill Arthur. But Barry summons some ice swords and he immobilizes him. He says that a trial will determine his future together with that of the dragon. The evacuation continues. Many lives were lost, and they give first aid to those who need it. Arthur, after being treated, is handcuffed by Vere. But just to be sure, they chain his mana core to prevent him from using magic. Arthur asks them to free his link. Vere looks at him surprised when he learns that this boy has a link with a dragon. Sylvie reverts to her miniature fox form. While he's being transported, misinformation spreads and the nobles blame Arthur for what happened. At that point, his family arrives. Vere gives him permission to speak to them. Arthur tries to calm them down, saying that soon he will clear up this misunderstanding. But in that instant, Veri receives a message from the committee. Under the authority vested in me by the Council of Dickathon, I, Veri Ori, announce the decision taken on the case, which will be put into execution immediately. Arthur Lewin, having committed acts of excessive violence, and having participated in the deplorable events that occurred at the Xyrus Academy, will be deprived of his wizard status, and his core will be confiscated. And until he has been properly tried, he will be put under arrest. After Veri's announcement, Arthur's family can't believe what's happening. Many witnesses wonder why they made that decision. But only Princess Kathleen reproaches the Spears, telling them that he saved all of them, and if he hadn't done something like that, until they arrived, they could all have died. She also says that she will talk to her parents to fix all of this. But Veri shows her the council's scroll with the Kings of Sap and Seal, approving Arthur's arrest, accepting that he can't do anything to persuade Veri. Arthur asks for permission to say goodbye to his family, and he repeats his words, saying that he will leave for some time until he clears up this misunderstanding, trying to calm them down in that way. But this time, it's his father who comforts him, saying that no matter what the rest say, they will always be waiting for his return with open arms. Spear Alfred conjures a magma beast and he tells Arthur to climb on it. It's cooler than it seems. Together, they head away from Xyrus. Veri is in front of them, and he is carrying Sylvie in a small summoned orb. Arthur tells him that he doesn't understand why they put so many restrictions on him. He's not dumb enough to face two spears. Alfred tells him that they are over the beast's clearing and they can't risk him escaping. Even with all their power, they must proceed with caution, since there may be dangers that even they aren't capable of facing. While they were lost in their conversation, they arrived at the Three Kingdoms Council's floating castle. Any use of any kind of magic is strictly prohibited, and Alfred gives him one last piece of advice. He can't speak to anyone, not even them, once he is inside the castle. After crossing some large corridors, they enter a hall, and in front of them are the kings of Dickathon's three races. Docid, the dwarf king, reproaches him for bowing so slightly before them. He says that he should be on his knees, but the human king says that there are more important things to deal with. However, Tesh's father interrupts in order to thank Arthur for having helped the students, and above all, his daughter. But this time, the two dwarf kings, with an aggressive attitude, reproach the elf king for his attitude, and they tell him that the boy which they have here, taking advantage of the situation, committed atrocious acts in order to eliminate his rival, who belonged to a noble house. But the accusations don't stop, and they also say that in the future, he may be dangerous, and they must destroy his core so that he can't even use magic, and kill the dragon to prevent it from being a danger to them. The human kings remain neutral in this respect, saying that they are thankful to him because he also saved their children. But that was not the right way of acting. However, the situation escalates between the two kings. When Arthur wants to say some words, he is ordered to be quiet in an aggressive manner, so much so that Alduin calls his spear so that they will be ready. But the situation comes to a halt, and without being able to defend himself, Arthur is locked in the dungeons. Alfred tells him that he will come regularly to bring him food. Until then, he should adapt to his new home. But a familiar voice gets Arthur's attention. Headmistress Cynthia is also locked. She's been there some days, and she is unaware of the attack at the academy, so he explains to her all that happened. She asks for details, what the leader looked like, and what was Luca's appearance. Arthur tells her everything he knows, and he tells her that he has reached a conclusion about her, but he hopes to be mistaken. Cynthia tells him that she would like to reveal everything, but a sound curse prevents her. Even without saying anything important, the pain is unbearable. In another room in the same castle, King Glader is visited by Docid. He tells him that he's not following the plan. Glader only tells him that his arguments were so absurd that it was impossible for him to accept them without raising suspicion. He reminds him that he's on his side to protect his family, and he should feel some guilt since he's betraying his entire people. Docid mocks him, saying that it doesn't matter what they do, this continent is destined to lose the war, and his best choice is to join them, especially given the riches they will obtain, and how they will be able to keep their titles. Gladir says not to compare him to himself, and he stays alone, thinking that he could never be a great wizard, and he was jealous of those in his family who were born with talent for magic. But getting rid of a boy who was born with an exceptional talent for magic will be a great satisfaction to him. Arthur wakes up from a nightmare, and in front of him, Speariah gives him a letter, and she tells him not to say anything. The letter is from the Elf King. In it, the Elf King says that soon the council will declare him and Cynthia guilty for the attack at the academy. She also says that she heard how Glader and Docid planned to send him off with someone, and not to worry about his family since Virion has sent them to a safe place. She apologizes for not being able to do more for him. The letter vanishes, and just then Baron arrives, saying that the council has made a decision. While they're waiting, Baron taunts him, saying that once his sentence has been pronounced, he will take care of his family as he did with his brother. Arthur mocks him, saying that it's not worth it for a spear to threaten a 13-year-old like that. Also, Luke is accepted voluntarily to be part of that and to attack his partners. Baron throws him on the floor and the door to the hall opens, where he manages to hear Cynthia's sentence, public execution. They manage to cross eyes briefly, but his time has come. The Dwarf Kings are the ones in charge of telling him that thanks to their benevolence, he will only lose his position as a wizard, and he will be jailed until further notice. Arthur asks what will happen to his link. Alduin tells him that upon losing his position as a wizard, he also will lose his link with any beast. Dosset also tells him not to worry, his link will be given to a more capable wizard, since a dragon is a rare thing that deserves to be by the side of a worthy wizard. With that, Arthur reaches the conclusion that they are allied with the Vritra clan, and he's taken again to his cell. But there was an unexpected companion there. Winsome was waiting for him, and he's holding Sylvie in his arms. The Dwarf Kings are celebrating that everything is going according to their plan, and that they were the ones selected to be the rulers of Dicathan's rebirth. The Queen asks him if the being that he spoke to was strong, and Dosset says that he was. He had never felt so much fear in his life. He was so powerful that he resembled a god, and he offered him riches and power that he'd never imagined. But someone interrupts them, a being with white hair that has an amethyst-colored eye on his forehead. In his hand, he has the body of a guard with a hole in his breast. He tells him that he was sent to eliminate the parasites, and he releases an intense mana blast. But at that instant, Alfred arrives to protect them. He summons 5 magma golems, but a single move was enough to destroy all of them. So Alfred covers himself with a magma armor, which burns so intensely that it resembles fire, and he goes into the attack. But even with all his power, he's unable to touch the being in front of him, and he's thrown against a wall. The being says that he possesses a power that may be useful for that continent's future, and he approaches him at a great speed, and with a single finger's attack, he leaves the spear out of the fight. He directs his attention towards the kings, but he receives an attack from Spear Micah from behind, who attacks by combining some gravity-based magic and bearing a giant earth hammer. But again, with a single finger, he shoots an attack that immobilizes Micah, and he redirects his attention towards the kings. But Micah gets up and she launches into the attack, intensifying her spells. But she's left stunned when she sees how the three-eye being can move despite being under the most powerful gravity spell that she possesses. In a single instant, he defeated 2 of the most powerful wizards on the continent. The kings can't move out of fear, and they tell him that Agrona threatened them to make them cooperate with his plan, and they plead for their lives. The being tells him to break the vow that he has with the spears, and without thinking it, he breaks the collar that bound them. But things are not as he expected, and at that moment, the Dwarf Kings die. Winsome has Sylvie in his hands, and he rebukes Arthur. His courage in saving the Academy members is admirable, but he must think about his safety, and especially Sylvie's safety. He also tells him that he doesn't understand why the one in charge took Elijah with him. Arthur tells him that when he gets out of there, he will find out. But Winsome again tells him that he's not thinking right about things. Elijah was taken to Alacria, and he's not able to escape from this prison. But even so, he wants to find the way to go to Alacria, which would be a big mistake, since setting foot there would mean a certain death. Arthur asks him what he must do. The Dwarf Kings are cooperating with the Vritra clan, and also the Human Kings, but the latter don't feel comfortable with their decision. Winsome is surprised by seeing that he deduced all that in a short time. But they are interrupted by Baron, who goes into attack after asking if he is the prisoner's friend. Winsome summons some weird spell in his hand of an amethyst color, and he completely neutralizes the attack. Baron is surprised, but he attacks again. However, it is all again in vain and he falls on his knees. At that instant, Very arrives, and he orders him not to do anything, since he's before a data, and no matter what he does, he will never be a match for him, and he says that they're waiting for them. When they arrive at the hall, the 3 remaining kings, Cynthia and the three-eyed being are there. Arthur becomes alert, but Winsome calms him down. When they start their meeting, the being introduces himself. His name is Aldir, and he was sent with Winsome to help give them a chance to win the war. He informs them that the traitors have been eliminated, and their spears are under his control, and that any mistaken choice they may have made before will be forgiven. The Human Kings are paralyzed with fear, but Glader asks if they are so powerful, why do they not end the war themselves? Aldir tells them that a war among Asuras would lead to the world's collapse, and that they made a pact with the Vritra clan and their allies not to attack each other and not to intervene with lesser beings. Arthur asks if their actions against the Dwarf Kings is not a breach of that pact. Winsome explains that they are being attacked by inhabitants of a continent governed by an Asura, so Agrona is breaking the pact indirectly, but he will try not to become involved further. But Arthur also asks them about the horned beings with a colossal power. Aldir shows interest in that, and he explains that those beings were lesser beings like them before, but they obtained their power gradually through constant experiments over the years. Together, they may face an Asura, but their numbers are limited, and Agrona won't risk losing his winning card. His role in the war will be to be the general of Dickathon's army to guarantee its victory. Arthur and Winsome split from the group, and he tells him that it's time to go say goodbye to his family since he must begin his training in Ephialtes. On the way, he tells him how the Asuras of Ephialtes are organized. They are divided into 8 races, and each race is made up of several clans, but only is chosen to be one of the 8 great ones, and the Vritra clan belonged to the Basilisk clan. He also tells him that what he's about to tell him is a secret even among the Asura elite. Some time ago, Sylvia was with an elite group carefully selected to kill Agrona. Sylvia infiltrated the group, and by the time they realized who she was, it was too late to take the dragon princess back to Ephialtes. But when they arrived in Agrona's territory, nothing was as they expected. Agrona's allies and the lesser beings with powers that matched those of the Asuras were waiting for them. Agrona not only experimented on them, he also crossed races, creating powerful beings and completely crushing the elite dragon squad. In that way, Agrona himself went before Lord Indra, the king of the 8 Asura races, and he told him that Sylvia had died. Indra became angry and he was about to start a large-scale war due to his daughter's death. But the other Asuras persuaded him to sign a peace treaty. Arthur concluded that the artifacts that make the spears powerful were provided by them to match Agrona's strength. But they finally reach his family's refuge. They all go out to greet him, and Rhaenyra is with them. But after taking a break, Winsome gives him a signal, and Arthur asks to talk alone with his family. When they are alone, he tells them that since he was born in that world, he never knew how to start this conversation. His parents first think that it's either a joke or the result of a bump on the head. But his father gets serious and he asks them to be quiet in order to hear what the boy has to say. Arthur told them about the world where he used to live, about each detail in his role there, and also about the people that he met and what his life was like. During all that time, his parents didn't say a single word. But as time went by, his father started to interrupt him to make short questions, but his face didn't show any emotion. On the other hand, his mother didn't say anything, and she didn't move, until she lost track of time, and his father said that he now understood why he had such a precise skill in battle and a superhuman talent with magic. Arthur tells him that in his world he used something called Kai, which in essence is very similar to mana, and that his battle skill is due to how he trained almost his entire life. But at that instant, his mother starts to laugh. Her face shows fear, disbelief, and above all else, she tries to persuade herself that everything is a very elaborate joke on his part, and that he shouldn't do something like that. Arthur tells her that none of what he said is a lie, and she starts to go hysterical, so he decides to leave them alone. After a while, his father comes out and he asks to speak alone with him. After moving away some distance, he tells him that his story has left him shocked, and that he knows he doesn't have a reason to lie to them. Arthur asks if he's fine, but his father reacts agitatedly. He says that he doesn't know how to treat him. Arthur, King Grey, everything is confusing. What he just told him isn't something that one can accept in one moment. He was originally a king, and older than him, and perhaps the moments they spent together weren't real, and he was just trying to act as they wanted him to. Especially with his mother, she never knew that she raised a grown man in the body of a baby as if he were her own son. And he hits a part of the cave, saying that he doesn't know if he's his son, since maybe he killed the baby in his mother's womb to take his place. Reynolds, realizing what he said, apologizes to him. But Arthur tells him that he doesn't know how reincarnation works, and that very probably it was like that. He never found the moment to tell them, but now that he's leaving to train for years, he thought that it would be the best moment, since they will be apart. But now he regrets doing it. He tells him that he never had a family in his previous life. He became a powerful person that no one could match, but his personality was never good. But after arriving in this world, he learned things that he didn't know. Maybe he's not the most powerful wizard, but he's a better person than in his previous world. He thanks him for having taken care of him all that time, and also for having loved him as his own son. He says goodbye to Rhaenyra, but she tells him not to go back to being the person he was. Winsome triggers a portal with his blood, but before leaving, Arthur asks him how he looks, and he tells him that his expression reminds him of Ephialtes warriors. They eliminate their feelings to be the most efficient in battle. They are transported to the Asura's land. They both walk on a bridge that reflects the sky. To their side, there is a row of cherry trees until they get to the doors of a castle. To the side, there is a statue of 2 dragons and an even bigger one on the top. Their wings cover almost the entire castle. Upon entering, 2 guards with gold scars on their faces look at Arthur with scorn, and they ask if it's fine that he's carrying Princess Sylvie like that. Winsome tells one of them that there is no trouble, and they enter a great hall together. At the end is Lord Indra sitting on his throne. His skin is pale, and his hair is even whiter than Winsome's. His eyes are purple, but he has a young face. Arthur doesn't feel any energy emanating from him, but suddenly his runes become activated, and he feels that he's burning. With a breath, he makes Sylvie disappear, and he tells him not to be tense. He only wants to meet his granddaughter. He tells him that her mana level is insultingly low. She hasn't been training the right way, so he decides that he will train her. He also tells him that he will tell him, through Winsome, when the time comes to go back to his land, and they leave. Arthur tells him that everything felt weird, and Winsome tells him that it's insulting for the Asura's pride to depend on a lesser being for this war, but he will be trained by the Asuras without any discrimination. In that way, they reach the cave of an old friend of Winsome's. Kadri, just like Aldir, belongs to the Thias clan of the Panteo race, and he will be his teacher in physical combat. Kadri is impressed when he learns that they were allowed to use an ether orb, an artifact that allows one to use the dragon's unique ability to use ether. Ether is a substance that exists in the entire universe, and which allows one to control time and separate the soul from the body. A week went by since he began his training. Inside, time passes in a different way. Also, the damage that he suffers doesn't matter. It won't affect his real body, and he can only leave if he dies, something that he did many times. Kadri's training is intense, but he admires his mental strength, since not even young Asuras can stand the feeling of being constantly murdered. But he makes him rest for short periods of time, since if he lingers for too long, his real body will react to death merely as a pain caused by a cut, which can be dangerous. He also tells him that he will turn him into a great warrior, not only relative to the human standards, but also among Asuras themselves. He constantly exposes him to a force known as the King's Force, which leaves him paralyzed by fear. A month has passed outside, but inside, he has been training for 1 year. He tells him that his skills are excellent, but they're focused on one-on-one combat. It's possible that in war, he will have to face the hybrids in groups, and he must control his mana reserves and use the right amount for each move. When he returns to his physical body, he sees an Asura child, who will be his training partner. He is offended about training beside a lesser being, but Kadri makes him accept. 4 months went by in the external world, but there, 4 years went by. With time, more Asura children joined, and Arthur was forced to fight 4 versus 1, with the order to only defend himself. Kadri thinks that if he had been born as an Asura, he could have been among the most powerful. Arthur's training with Kadri has reached its end, but both Asuras are impressed by his capacity. It is forbidden to use the ether orb on a child, due to the mental exhaustion that it causes, and often the adaptation to the physical world takes a long time. But it didn't cause any changes in him. On the way to his next training, Winsome gives him a letter from Dickathon revealing information about Alacria. There are 4 generals called Sides, and they are all hybrids with Vritra blood. They have a retainer under their command. One of them was able to beat a Dickathon spear easily, so he can't imagine how powerful the Sides are. Winsome gives him a list with the artifacts that he must get in a short period of time, and he gives him a rattle. He will have to be able to capture each beast without making the rattle sound. Without being able to complain more, Arthur jumps into his next training. Okay, we've been here for too long. This is how the first part of this Manhwa ends. Okay guys, if you like this video and you want the second part, comment with the word life. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment below. That's all for today.